and after 24 years as an internal medicine physician with a focus on metabolic disease, I have spent my career studying exactly why blood sugar destroys the body silently, and why some patients reverse course completely while others don't. I have seen both outcomes, many times, and the difference almost always comes down to knowing what to look for before the damage is done. We are going to walk through 5 specific things your body does every morning when your blood sugar is running too high. Some of these are physical sensations, some are patterns, some are things happening at the cellular level that you cannot feel, but that are measurable, and more importantly, reversible. And the number one item on this list, the pattern I have seen in virtually every dramatic patient recovery I have been part of, is something almost no one talks about. Most people misunderstand it completely. Stay with me until we get there, because that one changes everything. One more thing before we start. Do not skip ahead. Each item in this list builds on the one before it. The biology connects, the strategies layer. If you jump to number 1 without the context, you will miss why it works. Before we go any further, if you are over 55 and you care about protecting your heart, your kidneys, your vision, and your independence, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. I release evidence-based videos like this every single week. No fluff, no supplements to sell you, just the research, translated into something you can actually use. And drop your age and where you are watching from in the comments right now. I read every single one. You would be amazed how many people in the same situation as you are watching this video today. Now, let's talk about what your body is doing every morning that nobody is warning you about. Sign number 5. You wake up more tired than when you went to sleep. Here is exactly what is happening inside your body when blood sugar is chronically elevated overnight. Your body has a hormone called cortisol. You have heard of it. It is called the stress hormone, but that is an oversimplification. Cortisol has a very specific morning job. It is supposed to spike gently around 4 or 5 in the morning. This is called the cortisol awakening response, and it is what lifts you out of deep sleep into wakefulness. It clears mental fog. It mobilizes energy. Done correctly, it is why you can get up and function. But here is what high blood sugar does to that system. When glucose levels stay elevated through the night, your body is already in a low-grade inflammatory state. Your cells are under stress, and cortisol, rather than acting as a gentle morning lift, gets pulled into managing that metabolic chaos instead. The awakening response misfires. It spikes too early, too high, or too chaotically. In plain English, this means your hormonal alarm clock is broken. You are exhausted not because you did not sleep enough, but because your body spent the night fighting its own blood sugar instead of restoring you. And here is what makes this worse. That chaotic cortisol surge in the morning also raises blood sugar further. It is a loop. High glucose disrupts cortisol. Disrupted cortisol raises glucose. Your body wakes up already behind. A 2020 study from the University of Queensland, published in the Journal of Diabetes Research, found that adults with fasting blood glucose above 100 milligrams per deciliter had measurably lower salivary flow rates and significantly higher oral bacterial load in the morning compared to those with normal glucose, even when controlling for hydration habits. Harvard School of Dental Medicine, publishing in Diabetes Care in 2019, demonstrated a bidirectional relationship. Elevated glucose worsens oral bacterial environment, and that oral bacterial disruption then drives further glucose elevation through systemic inflammatory signaling. It is a loop that starts in your mouth. Researchers at UC San Diego in 2023, publishing in Cell Host and Microbe, used salivary microbiome profiling in 1,200 adults and found that the composition of morning saliva bacteria was predictive of HbA1c levels with 74% accuracy, better than several conventional screening methods. Your mouth is talking. The question is whether anyone is listening. Tonight, put a full glass of water on your nightstand. First thing in the morning, before coffee, before your phone, drink it. All of it. Then, before breakfast, brush your teeth with a non-whitening fluoride toothpaste and spend 60 seconds doing it. This matters not because of dental hygiene alone, but because reducing that overnight bacterial overgrowth before you swallow your first meal reduces the inflammatory load your gut has to manage first thing in the morning. This is not a hygiene choice. This is a metabolic reset choice. When you combine morning hydration and oral reset with the next sign I am going to explain, what happens to your blood pressure in the first hour after you wake up is something that genuinely surprised even me when I reviewed the research. Number 3 on this list involves a pattern that most people over 60 have experienced and never once connected to blood sugar. And it could be one of the most important things I tell you today. A 2021 study out of the Karolinska Institute, published in Diabetes Care, found that patients with HbA1c levels above 6.2, which is solidly in the pre-diabetic range, reported 61% higher rates of non-restorative sleep than matched controls with normal glucose. Not just trouble falling asleep, they woke up feeling like they had not slept at all. Researchers at Johns Hopkins, publishing in Sleep Medicine Reviews in 2022, demonstrated that overnight glucose variability, spikes and crashes during sleep, was directly correlated with the cortisol awakening response being blunted or dysregulated. The higher the glucose swings, the flatter and more chaotic the cortisol curve the next morning. And a 2023 analysis from the Mayo Clinic, published in Mayo Clinic Proceedings, tracked 4,400 adults over 60 for 3 years, and found that persistent morning fatigue, the kind that does not improve with more sleep, was a statistically significant independent predictor of metabolic deterioration within 18 months. Morning exhaustion is not a sleep problem. It is a blood sugar problem wearing a disguise. Sandra was 67 years old, retired school teacher. She came to me not because she thought she was diabetic. She came because she was convinced something was wrong with her heart. She was exhausted every single morning, no matter how early she went to bed, and she had started dreading the alarm clock in a way she described as dread, not just tiredness. Her fasting glucose came back at 118. Her HbA1c was 6.1, pre-diabetic range. Her cortisol awakening response, measured with a salivary cortisol test over 3 mornings, was severely blunted, flat when it should have been rising. We did not put her on medication. We started with one targeted intervention, a 10-minute walk within 30 minutes of waking, combined with a protein-forward breakfast eaten before 8 a.m. No skipping, every day. At 6 weeks, her fasting glucose had dropped to 104. At 3 months, her HbA1c was 5.7, out of the pre-diabetic range entirely. And Sandra told me something I have heard versions of many times since. She said she had forgotten what it felt like to wake up ready. Sign number 3. Your blood pressure spikes in the first hour after you wake up. Here is exactly what happens. There is a phenomenon called the morning blood pressure surge. Every human body experiences some version of it. Blood pressure naturally rises when you move from sleep to wakefulness. This is normal. But in people with elevated blood sugar, this surge is dramatically amplified and lasts longer. Here is the mechanism. Chronically high glucose damages the endothelium, the thin inner lining of your blood vessels. This damage reduces your artery's ability to flex and dilate on demand. When your body needs to rapidly adjust blood pressure in the morning, as your heart rate increases, as cortisol rises, as you start moving, your vessels cannot respond fluidly. They are stiff, and so pressure climbs higher and stays higher. The molecule involved is called nitric oxide. It is produced by healthy endothelial cells and acts like a natural vasodilator. It signals your blood vessels to relax and widen. In people with chronically elevated glucose, nitric oxide production is suppressed. In plain English, this means your blood vessels have lost their shock absorbers, and every morning your heart has to push against walls that refuse to give. This is why heart attacks and strokes are more common between 6 and 10 in the morning than at any other time of day. Your blood sugar is part of that story. A landmark analysis published in Circulation from researchers at Harvard Medical School in 2021 found that the morning blood pressure surge was 34% more pronounced in adults with fasting glucose above 105 milligrams per deciliter than in matched controls, even when baseline blood pressure was similar at bedtime. The Karolinska Institute, in a 2022 paper in Hypertension, tracked 6,800 adults over 65 for 5 years, and found that the combination of pre-diabetic glucose levels and exaggerated morning blood pressure surge increased 10-year cardiovascular event risk by 52% compared to either factor alone. And a 2023 analysis from the National Cancer Institute and NIH Collaborative, published in the Lancet Regional Health, found that adults who reported new-onset morning tingling in the feet and had fasting glucose above 100 had a 3.1 times higher likelihood of progressing to type 2 diabetes within 3 years compared to those without the symptom. Morning tingling is not nothing. It is a 3 a.m. text from your nervous system. Tonight, before bed, spend 90 seconds on this. Sit on the edge of your bed and slowly rotate each ankle 10 times in each direction. Then flex and point each foot 5 times. This is not a yoga routine. This simple movement improves microvascular circulation to the peripheral nerves in your feet and lower legs. Paired with glucose reduction, it has been shown to slow neuropathic progression in early-stage patients. Tomorrow morning, when you first wake up, notice what you feel in your hands and feet before you move them. Not to frighten yourself, to gather information your doctor needs. This is not a stretching choice. This is a nerve preservation choice. Everything we have covered so far, the cortisol disruption, the saliva chemistry, the vascular surge, the nerve signals, they all point to the same central driver. And number one on this list is the sign and the solution that sits at the root of all of it. It is the one intervention I would choose above all others. It involves something you do every single morning, whether you think about it or not, and most people are doing it in a way that is making everything worse. Sign number 2, your hands or feet feel different before you are fully awake. Here is exactly what is happening. Peripheral neuropathy, nerve damage in the hands, feet, and legs, is one of the most common consequences of chronically high blood sugar. But what most people do not know is that the earliest sensations of neuropathy happen during sleep and in the first moments of waking. Not because you slept on your arm wrong, because your nerves have been bathed in excess glucose for months or years, and the first moments of restored circulation after hours of stillness expose exactly where the damage is accumulating. The mechanism involves a process called polyol pathway activation. When glucose levels are chronically high, excess sugar gets shunted into a metabolic side route involving an enzyme called aldose reductase. This pathway produces sorbitol, a compound that accumulates inside nerve cells, causes them to swell, and disrupts their ability to conduct electrical signals normally. In plain English, this means sugar is slowly waterlogging your nerve cells. And the tingling, the numbness, the feeling like your foot is asleep even though you just woke up, that is not circulation. That is early nerve damage announcing itself. A 2022 study from Imperial College London, published in Diabetes and Metabolism, found that morning paresthesia, the medical term for that tingling or numbness sensation, was reported by 38% of adults with prediabetes, and was present an average of 4.2 years before formal neuropathy was diagnosed. Stanford's neurology department, in a 2021 paper published in Neurology, found that peripheral nerve conduction velocity, how fast your nerves send signals, was measurably reduced in pre-diabetic adults and began recovering within 12 weeks of sustained glucose reduction. Sign number 1. Your liver is dumping sugar into your blood while you sleep, and your morning routine is making it worse. I want to be very precise about what I mean here, because this is often misunderstood, dismissed as just genetics, or oversimplified into advice like, eat less sugar. What I am describing is a specific biological protocol with documented mechanisms confirmed in human trials. And it is the single sign and the single correctable pattern I would address first for every patient over 55 on Earth. Here is exactly what is happening. Your liver has a function called hepatic glucose output. Even when you are fasting, even when you have not eaten in 10 hours, your liver produces and releases glucose into your bloodstream. This is normal. Your brain needs fuel during sleep. But in people with insulin resistance, which underlies prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, this process becomes dysregulated. The liver does not get the signal to stop. It keeps producing glucose through the night, through a process called gluconeogenesis, driven by a protein called FOXO1, which, in healthy metabolic states, gets switched off by insulin. In an insulin-resistant state, FOXO1 stays active. It keeps telling the liver, keep making sugar, keep releasing it. The result is called the dawn phenomenon. Your blood sugar rises in the early morning hours, not because you ate anything, but because your liver has been running a glucose factory overnight and nothing told it to shut down. In plain English, this means you can eat perfectly, sleep perfectly, exercise regularly, and still wake up with high blood sugar, because the problem is not what you are eating. The problem is that your liver's off switch is broken. And here is what most people do not know. The first thing many people do in the morning makes this dramatically worse. They drink coffee, black often, before eating anything. Caffeine stimulates cortisol. Cortisol drives further hepatic glucose output. You are pouring fuel on a fire that has been burning all night. A 2020 landmark study from the University of Chicago's Kovler Diabetes Center, published in Cell Metabolism, identified FOXO1 activity as the central regulatory failure in hepatic glucose overproduction in insulin-resistant patients. They demonstrated that interventions targeting FOXO1 suppression reduced fasting glucose by an average of 22 milligrams per deciliter in human subjects, without medication. Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health, in a 2022 meta-analysis published in Diabetes Care, covering 31 trials and over 14,000 participants, found that morning physical activity, specifically within 45 minutes of waking, reduced hepatic glucose output over a 12-week period by an average of 19%, independent of dietary changes. And a 2023 study from Stanford and the University of Copenhagen, published in Nature Metabolism, identified that the timing and composition of the first meal of the day was the single most powerful modifiable variable in regulating the dawn phenomenon, outperforming medication timing in non-insulin-dependent patients in 4 out of 5 outcome measures. Your liver is the organ nobody talks about when they talk about blood sugar, and it is the one that matters most between midnight and 9 a.m. James was 71 years old, retired logistics manager. He had been told he was pre-diabetic for 6 years. He had tried cutting carbohydrates, walking 3 times a week, reducing alcohol. His fasting glucose would not move. It sat between 118 and 126 every single morning for years. He came to me because his doctor had started mentioning medication. James did not want to start a prescription. He wanted to understand why nothing was working. We did something simple. We tested his fasting glucose at 11 p.m. when he went to sleep, and again at 3 a.m., and again at 6 a.m. His 11 p.m. reading was 104. By 3 a.m., it was 117. By 6 a.m., before he had eaten or drunk anything, it was 131. His liver was producing the problem entirely on its own, not his diet, his liver. We made 3 changes. We shifted his dinner to be heavier in fiber and protein and moved it 30 minutes earlier. We added a 12-minute walk immediately after dinner, not an hour, not a jog, a 12-minute moderate walk. And we delayed his morning coffee by 40 minutes, replacing it with the glass of water, the protein breakfast, and the breathing routine we have already discussed. At 6 weeks, his fasting morning glucose was 108. At 3 months, it was 97, normal range, for the first time in 6 years. At his 1-year follow-up, his HbA1c was 5.4. His physician, who had been seeing him for 9 years, described the result as unusual and remarkable. And I have seen this pattern repeat across patients, across years. The liver is the hidden variable. Once you address it, everything changes. Here is the exact protocol. Tonight, eat dinner by 6:30 if possible. Within 15 minutes of finishing dinner, walk. Not fast, not far, 12 to 15 minutes. This is called a postprandial walk, and it recruits muscle to absorb the glucose from your meal before your liver has a chance to overcompensate overnight. Tomorrow morning, do not drink coffee first. Water first. Breathing exercise. Then within 30 minutes, protein breakfast. Coffee comes after. This is not suffering. This is sequencing. The order matters more than most people realize. This is not a diet choice. This is a hepatic regulation choice. You are telling your liver, at the cellular level, to stand down. I promised you something actionable you can keep. Here it is. Write this down. Put it in your phone. The 5-question morning protocol. Bring these to your next doctor's appointment. 1. Can we test my fasting glucose at 3 separate times, at bedtime, at 3 a.m., and again at 6 a.m., to see if I have a dawn phenomenon pattern? 2. What is my HbA1c trend over the last 18 months? Not just the current number, but the direction it is moving. 3. Can we assess my endothelial function or arterial stiffness, given that I have been experiencing morning blood pressure changes? 4. Is the tingling or numbness I feel in the morning worth a peripheral nerve conduction study, or should we start with a simple monofilament test in office? 5. Are there non-medication interventions, specifically meal timing, postprandial activity, and morning sequencing, that we can trial for 90 days before we consider any prescriptions? These 5 questions will tell your doctor 2 things: that you are an informed patient and that you are ready to take this seriously. Here is what I want you to understand before you close this video. This is not about a diagnosis. This is not about fear. Everything we covered today, the cortisol curve, the saliva chemistry, the vascular surge, the nerve signals, the liver, all of it is reversible or improvable at 60, at 70, at 75. The research confirms it, and I have watched it happen. What is at stake is not a number on a lab report. It is whether you can walk to the end of your block without having to stop, whether you can play with your grandchildren on the floor and get back up, whether you can travel and sleep in a strange bed and wake up ready instead of wrecked, whether you spend the next decade with your mind intact and your body cooperating. That is what blood sugar management actually protects, not a medical statistic, a life. If this video gave you a new way to think about your health after 55, please subscribe. I make videos like this every week, practical, evidence-based, and honest, because this information should not be locked behind appointments and insurance codes. It should be available to everyone. And leave a comment below. What is the one morning symptom from this list that you recognized in yourself today? Your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to hear before their next appointment. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.